And I don't know if that's a blessing or what, to have, I learned a lot. I was sober 4 years when my son was born, and so if I had not had that, even though being raised in the church, being raised with the support of a big family, there's a lot of loneliness in alcoholism. There's a lot of loneliness in single parenting.
Sure,
so some of
there.
these themes, some of these things were, I think it was God's way of kind of nurturing me along and putting me in the right people. And even to this day, among all my blessings, I sometimes think, you're not there, you're not listening. When is this going to go? That's why I say it's just one foot in front of the other.
Yes,
if you can,
that race
that's
that you
it.
speak
God,
of.
if you
Yes.
have to be mad at God and go in the closet, shut the door and holler, I've done
In
it.
the car, yes.
He's big enough to take it. It does not matter. It's just, I believe. Help me now when I don't believe. Help me
Sure.
when it feels like you are too busy for me.
Help my
because
unbelief.
yes, that's
help my
it.
unbelief.
So,
and I'm certain that there are single parents out there that are anticipating getting into a career change and maybe wanting communications, as you stated, deadlines.
Yes.
That's a critical piece. And I'm hearing you say that a support base is very, very imperative.
to me, that was essential. If I did not have that, I think now, in this age, where support groups now you can find a support group.
Yes, you
I mean, they
can.
list them
Yes,
in the
you
newspaper
can.
now.
Yes, yes, there's
even
so many,
before my
yes.
generation, single parenting still had that stigma that was, and again, being raised in the Catholic Church, that was another thing that was, the church is now coming around to where they embrace single parents. They have
Yes.
ministries geared toward the single
Sure.
parent. I'm of the generation that was right at the cusp when they were changing that. Before that, I know in my faith tradition, I had
didn't.
aunts and uncles that
Yes.
went through divorces, and it was,
everything was quiet.
Yes, it
It's
was
like
quiet.
whatever
You
stays
made
in
a
the house,
pact
you
that-
keep it in the house.
That's correct.
And I think that that's very suppressing. I
Yes,
think it's very
yes.
suppressing. I think it's very, very critical to have someone that you can
Absolutely.
talk to. And we've
Absolutely.
got about a minute and a half, but I'm really happy that you did share, because oftentimes parents think we have to be perfect.
No.
And there's no one perfect except God.
Well, and I always say, and turning things over to God, turning the heaviness, the difficulty, the answers the questions that you don't have answers to, turn them over. You don't have to know. You don't wash your
No.
hands before you get into the shower. Don't get right to turn this over and say, help me with this. I don't know. No parent is perfect.
Yes.
And single parents, I swear, that struggle, in a way, I think God has a special place in his heart for people who struggle, who keep their eyes, on the prize. And I think I'm blessed because I've got the prize today.
Yes, you are. And we're going to return, and I really want to pick back up on running that race with persistence. So don't change that TV channel. We'll be back with Janet, and we're going to talk about running the race with persistence, and we're going to share more about single parenting. Thank you.
Whatever we deny or embrace, for worse or for better.
Underneath everything we are all people. And when we reach out a hand to one, we can influence the condition of all. That's what it means to live united.
Thanks for joining us again. I am La Petite Dece with Single Parent, brought to you by Christ Our Shepherd Ministries. We were talking with Janetdenk. She's the publisher of the Matthews Record newspaper. And we shared some of Janet's accomplishments. She has a BA in communications. And Janet is very unique for our show. We typically interview single parents, but Janet navigated home life and meeting deadlines with a child, a 2-year-old, prior to meeting her husband, Mr. Wright. So Janet, tell us a little bit, just bring the audience up to date on some of the things that you shared relative to being a single parent, working in the newspaper company and the deadlines, and then we're going to talk to single women and some of the qualities and attributes that you looked for in your quote, Mr. Wright.
Well, thank
Yes.
you. It's funny that you say Mr. Right, because, like any marriage, Mr. Right isn't always Mr. Right. But I'll tell you what, the
He's right
path
for you.
was, single parenting does this for a woman, I believe. And that is that it helps. I always say my son was, he helped my path become much clearer, because it wasn't just myself or my career or, you know, my life. I had this, and some people are blessed to have that in the partner that they
Yes.
find that they're married to, and when they decide to have children, they're set. My path wasn't that way, but what it did was help me focus, and really that's why I say stay the course, because everything changed once my son was born. You know, what I ate, what I wore, who I hung out with, the jobs that I could take, and that led to the men that I dated.
Sure.
I grew up. You have to grow up quickly.
Quickly, yes.
And I should have been grown up before that, but that just really focused the path on that. And so Jim and I were both in the same industry, and we met. He didn't know me as anybody. Our offices were right down the hall from one another, and we worked odd spots. That's the other thing about finding a mate in your industry. I mean, the newspaper business, people are working all sorts of hours,
Sure.
and we sort of were on that same oddball shift.
And he understood the
He
schedule
understood
demands.
that, and he
Sure.
would also, it wasn't the same 9 to 5 antics that would go on at the office. So there was a lot of camaraderie and a lot of fun, and that was one of the most attractive qualities about him, I think, was his sense of humor, because I needed that. And up to that point, there
Sure.
was a lot of gallows humor. I mean, but he took a real interest, and he'd watch me flit around in my job, and then he'd watch me flit out the door and make other deadlines,
Yes.
and that was
Go
because
pick the
I was
son up,
trying
run
to
here. Yes, go get the
absolutely. I
contract
was
to
on
get
a
back.
schedule, and it
Sure.
was funny. He used to say, "I don't know how you do it. I don't." And you know, if I didn't know how I did it, but you just do it.
You just do it.
And
Sure.
he saw that as a strength. And you know, sometimes you know you go home and it's you after everything is settled down, second shift, you got the child in bed and you're sitting there by yourself, exhausted, and there's times when it can creep in where you don't feel like you're doing it. So
Sure.
to have somebody see you succeed and tell you that you're succeeding, we came from very similar backgrounds in the Midwest, and he just reminded me, his humor and his just his personality felt so comfortable. He felt like I don't want to say a brother, but he was, my comfort level with him was like that. And it was like my being a parent was sort of a seamless thing, even though we laugh now, when we got married, it was mixed with water, instant kid. He was a guy from the prairies of Kansas. I was a gal from the inner city, and here we were, together. And my son just loved him, and he charmed my son the same way he charmed me, just by being funny and sincere and authentic. And
So some of the qualities that you're saying, and let's speak to the single ladies, because there are a lot of ladies that say, oh, life is lonely, and they're praying for a husband. And you're saying this is a guy that was very unique, and he was very caring. He seems,
Yes.
a caretaker.
Yes.
And in addition to that, I think you said he had some very good, solid foundations.
Yes.
And he would ask you about your son.
yes.
Have you experienced dating where an individual took more interest in you and not your child?
Yes, and you can understand that on the dating scene, because, and I'm sure you could do a whole show on people
just
who
dating. Yes.
just dating,
Yes,
and then
you
also
could.
dating people with children.
Yes.
Because on that side, they're always thinking, is she trying or he trying to trap me
Yeah,
for the spouse,
right.
to be the daddy or the mommy? So you have to watch that. And again, that is an exercise in selflessness. What I did is, children, they're a very good radar for who you're going to have in. And I
Yes,
thought it
they
was real
are.
important. I lived on my own. This is how I knew this was another good flag that went up about him.
Ladies, listen. Flag.
When I'd say, why don't you stay? Or can you stay? He'd say, no.
Good for him.
The man went home. That's real important.
That's different. Yes.
And it could have been for selfish reasons. Maybe we'd laugh about that now. But he didn't. He understood the sanctity of a mother
Yes.
and her children.
Sure.
That was
Especially
something.
a boy. Especially raising a
Absolutely.
boy. That
And he
speaks
respected my
profoundly.
parents. I was living in an apartment above their garage in the carriage house. It's a very old neighborhood in Detroit. And like I said, this apartment was small. I had my son in essentially a sort of a tricked up closet. You know, I had decorated it, and I was upstairs.
It was home.
It was home. It was
Yes.
small. It was just what we needed. And he loved coming over. He'd mow my parents' lawn.